People who know me or watch the Watchfinder channel will know that I absolutely love F1. Whether it's the speed, or the cars, or the technology, or the drama, or the overtakes, or the crashes, I love absolutely all of it, even the boring bits. Some people say F1 is just cars going around in circles, but to me that's a little bit like saying football is just a bunch of blokes taking their pet balls out for a jog. But what really makes F1 for me is a lot of the stuff that happens off the track and not on it. Whether it's scandals with the team bosses, cheating with technology, or even the watches they wear, those parts really make the sport what it is. So I'm going to take a look at the watches of Formula 1. Obviously, timekeeping is a very important part of motor racing. It doesn't really work if one person says, "Oh, I thought that was pretty quick," and someone else says, "Oh, I thought that was even quicker." What you need is a way to actually measure the time. Pretty much as soon as cars were invented, people were racing them. That's just human nature. And from the 1920s, a certain watch company called Heuer decided to take advantage of that with the time of trip. These were stopwatches mounted into dashboard plates so drivers could measure their laps and sector times. It was actually Jack Heuer of Heuer in the 1960s who first brought watches to F1. He was trying to make a living selling his watches on the grid, specifically to racing driver Joe Siffert. Now, Formula 1 was very different then. Drivers weren't millionaires, and Joe Siffert actually owned his own Porsche dealership. That's how he made the money to race. But he tried to get a little bit more cash on the side by selling Jack's Heuer watches to other drivers in the pit lane. It was because of this relationship with F1 drivers that Heuer became the first non-motorsport sponsor of F1, and it's been like that ever since. These days, almost every single F1 team has a watch sponsor, and we're going to take a look at those, starting with Williams. With Williams being a British racing team, it makes sense that their watch sponsor is also British, and so they have chosen Bremont. I mean, they're both properly British because they are both struggling. And both of those brands are known for their creative interpretation of the rules. Williams had the very clever active suspension, which allowed the car to stay completely flat in turns and during acceleration and deceleration, giving the perfect amount of downforce under the car. Bremont, by comparison, released what they claimed was an in-house caliber, the BWC01, but it was actually made by La Joux-Perret, a third-party movement manufacturer. You can purchase a Bremont team watch, the Supermarine Williams WR22. It has some blue accents from the Williams team and will cost you around $7,000. For all the ups and downs of Williams and Bremont, I do have a little bit of a soft spot for both of them, what with them being so very British. Next up we have Aston Martin, which used to be Racing Point, which used to be Force India. The watch brand they've chosen has equally been around the houses, Girard-Perregaux. They used to be the sponsor for Ferrari, but now they're partnered with Aston Martin. Ironically, Girard-Perregaux and Aston Martin are both in that "I want one, but not enough to actually spend any money on one" category. To celebrate the partnership, Girard-Perregaux introduced the Laureato carbon fibre, which has a forged carbon case and costs a whopping $25,000. That's almost enough to put a deposit down on an actual Aston Martin. The irony is that number one driver Sebastian Vettel would probably sooner be seen picking up rubbish after a race than wearing a luxury watch. It's a bit of a shame to be seeing Seb go, but I wish him the very best, and I wish Aston Martin the very best as well. Now, the real oddball in this entire mix is AlphaTauri. They used to be sponsored by Casio, but now they're sponsored by no one. They don't have a watch sponsor, which is perhaps why some of their times have really gone downhill on the track. Now, AlphaTauri used to be called Toro Rosso. They're the junior team to the larger and more successful Red Bull team. And I'm ashamed to say it took me a very long time to realise that Toro Rosso means Red Bull in Italian, which is where the team is based. Casio also used to sponsor Red Bull as well, but Red Bull ditched Casio in favour of another brand that we'll see later on. I can imagine being a racing driver and seeing everyone else wearing Richard Milles and things like that, and you're stuck with a Casio. Perhaps they're actually better off. Now, if you know anything about the Haas F1 team, you will know that they are absolutely bonkers. From their outspoken team boss Gunther Steiner to the scandals they constantly seem to be embroiled in, Haas is perhaps the biggest source of drama on the grid. As a side note, perhaps you remember the Rich Energy sponsorship scandal where Haas F1 took a sponsorship deal from the energy drink company Rich Energy. Rich Energy signed a multi-million-dollar deal when they only had about $500 in their bank account. So it takes a brave watchmaker to take on the Haas F1 team, and the watchmaker that's taken on that challenge is Cyrus. Cyrus has watches like the Klepsis, which sounds a bit like a venereal disease, Dice Lemon Double Chrono, which is a $40,000 watch with 2 chronograph mechanisms built in, and the Vertical Tourbillon, which costs $200,000, enough to keep Haas in parts when they keep crashing. I do wonder if those watches are actually worth a little bit more than the team itself. Next up is Alfa Romeo. Now, Alfa Romeo road cars are considered some of the best drivers' cars out there. However, to quote the great Jeremy Clarkson, you do have to take a bit of a brave pill in order to buy one. An example of such a man is Alexandre Pesce, the owner of the Rebellion Racing team. As I understand it, Alexandre races in both LMP1 and Dakar, and he funds both of those teams with Rebellion timepieces. Rebellion timepieces makes the Revolt C42 Alfa Romeo edition, which contains carbon fibre from the actual F1 cars. The looks aren't for everyone, and perhaps the name is a little bit of a clue. One of those will cost you around $25,000. Next we get to McLaren, one of the most successful teams on the Formula 1 grid, and they have chosen to partner with Richard Mille. Kinda makes sense. Big, bold supercars partnering with big, bold superwatches, both bright orange. The Richard Mille RM6702 for McLaren is actually one of the lightest watches Richard Mille makes. In fact, the lightest automatic watch it makes. It weighs in at just 32 grams and, at current market value, costs around $400,000. McLaren driver Lando Norris was believed to be wearing a prototype version of the 6702 at a Euro 2020 football game. He was actually mugged for his watch when he was going back to his car. Richard Mille has made a number of different watches for other Formula 1 drivers directly as well, including the great Kimi Raikkonen and Fernando Alonso. Talking of Fernando Alonso, driver for Alpine F1, Alpine are sponsored now by Bell & Ross, which means Fernando has had to hang up his Richard Mille for now in favour of the cheaper brand. It's kind of appropriate since Alpine and Bell & Ross are both French manufacturers. Bell & Ross was actually founded as a university project by 2 friends, Bruno Bellamish and Carlos Frossillo. If you want to buy an Alpine Bell & Ross edition, you can. There is the Bell & Ross BR0394 A521 Alpine Team Edition, which comes with some blue accents and the logo on the second hand. Perhaps Alonso had had enough of wearing his Bell & Ross because next year he is going to Aston Martin to replace the retiring Sebastian Vettel, so he'll be able to upgrade his watch as well to a Gerard Perregaux. Now, the really strange thing is that Alpine F1 seem to think that their junior driver, F2 sensation Oscar Piastri, will be taking over Alonso's Bell & Ross. However, after announcing his placement in the team, Piastri flatly denied it and hasn't said anything else since. Weird. Now, for a big Germanic car like a Mercedes, you need a big Germanic watch, and what better choice is there than an IWC? This is a brand that hails from Schaffhausen, a part of Switzerland that is almost entirely surrounded by Germany. It is basically Germany. One of the really cool things I like about the IWC and Mercedes partnership is they invented the watch-on-glove sponsorship. That's where a racing driver wears his fireproof gloves and rather than the watch being hidden underneath, a picture of the watch is printed around the wrist area of the glove. Genius! IWC's recent experimentation with colour really ties in with Lewis Hamilton's flair for fashion, and we have seen a number of different editions come out from Mercedes F1 with IWC that have some bold colour. My favourite IWC of all time is the Petronas F1 chronograph with the Petronas blue accents. Just so happen to tie in very nicely with the trend for Tiffany blue, which is almost the same. One of those will cost around $8,000, but for slender George Russell it might just be a little bit too big. Now you're going to get a little bit of deja vu with Ferrari because they are also sponsored by Richard Mille that seems to be two-timing them with McLaren. Rather suspiciously, Ferrari driver Charles Leclerc also had his 6702 stolen. Now, former Ferrari watch sponsor Hublot must be incredibly jealous because when the previous F1 boss Bernie Ecclestone had his Hublot stolen, they decided to put out a rather tasteful campaign with his bruised face and a line that said, "See what people will do for a Hublot." Nice. Maybe Ferrari ditched Hublot as a condition of Nico Leonard buying his F12. And to the fastest team on the grid so far this year, we go to Red Bull, who are sponsored by none other than Tag Heuer. Seems rather fitting that the watch company that started this all would be paired with the fastest team on the grid. There is, however, a little bit of a weird relationship with Tag Heuer and team boss Christian Horner, whose name keeps falling out of my head. Now there is a bit of a weird relationship with Tag Heuer.
Tag Heuer and Christian Horner is because it's Heuer and Horner.
Now there is a little bit of a weird relationship with Tag Heuer and team boss Christian Horner. Now this is going to get a little bit nerdy, but you might recall that Red Bull fell out with engine supplier Renault. But considering Christian Horner had fallen out with pretty much every other engine supplier as well, they had no choice but to stick with the Renault engine. Instead, they rebranded it as a Tag Heuer power unit. Now that's quite cool because it harks back to the 1980s Tag Porsche F1 engines of the turbo era. To tie all that in together in a neat little bow, Tag, that made that engine, is the same holding company, Techniques d'Avant-Garde, that bought a failing Heuer in the 80s and rebranded it as Tag Heuer. So Tag Heuer stepped in and gave Christian Horner an opportunity to stick with the Renault engine until they swapped with Honda. However, in Christian Horner's usual abrasive way, he insisted on calling it Tag Heuer. Now Tag Heuer is one of the cheaper watches that you'll see here, and you can purchase a Tag Heuer F1 times Red Bull Racing for around $2,000, which isn't too bad. And if you buy one, Michael Massey will personally deliver it to you. So you can see that the scandal of F1 goes all the way up the wrists of the drivers, and perhaps you'll get a little bit of a flavour of why I love the sport so much. If you want to see me talking about more sports personalities and industry greats and the watches they wear, please do make sure to like, comment and subscribe to this video. This is my personal channel, so it's very, very much appreciated. If you want to see more of me, make sure to head on over to the Watchfinder channel as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.